The amusement park Sun Valley Fun Park in Santa Clara had long seen better days. Once, it was the backdrop for ice cream commercials and hosted lively summer festivals. Now, the faint scent of cotton candy lingered in the air, the carousels creaked with age, and tired-looking parents sat on benches, watching their children run toward the old swings with the same excitement as kids had decades ago. Everything in this park creaked just a little, but that was part of its soul, as if it remembered every visit it had ever witnessed. It was on one of these quiet April days that he arrived, a man in a gray hoodie, black cap, and dark sunglasses. Brad Pitt. He was alone. No security, no press, nothing that usually accompanied him. Just a man who wanted to blend into the crowd and disappear into its everyday hum. He walked through the park slowly, unhurried, holding a paper cup of coffee he'd bought from a small cafe near the entrance. The coffee was mediocre but warm and somehow comforting. Today, he didn't need to be famous. No need for statements, photos, or even a smile. He simply walked and watched people. Lately, that had become his favorite thing, observing. He noticed emotions, glances, children's joy, and parents' quiet concern. No one looked at him twice here. Everyone was wrapped up in their own lives, and it was strangely pleasant. He passed a stand selling caramel apples, walked by the old Ferris wheel that turned slowly, and stopped near one of the classic games, ring toss. There stood a little girl, around 8 years old. Thin, with large eyes and slightly messy chestnut hair. She clutched a plastic ring in her hands, her lips set in a concentrated line. She threw the ring. It bounced off the bottleneck and fell to the floor. Almost, Brad whispered, not even realizing it. She tried again. Missed. A third time, still nothing. He saw her exhale quietly and wipe her nose with the sleeve of her jacket. Then she turned and walked away, trying not to show anyone how disappointed she was. Brad followed her with his eyes. A few minutes later, he saw her again, standing by the lemonade stand, not buying anything, just staring at the display. He walked up, stood beside her, pretending to read the menu. She glanced at him, but didn't seem to recognize him. He bought a lemonade, looked at her, and said, "Do you like strawberry?" She shrugged. "Maybe," she answered after a pause. "But I don't have any money." He leaned toward the vendor and ordered a second lemonade. "Then I guess now's your chance to try it," he said, handing her the cup. She took it carefully, as if it might disappear at any second. "Thank you, the mister." He smiled. "Just Brad is fine," he said. "What's your name?" "Luna," she replied, taking a small sip. Then added, "Like the moon in the sky." "That's a beautiful name," he winked, raising his own cup. They stood under the shade of the awning, watching the passers-by. Luna held her cup with both hands, as if afraid to drop it. "You were trying to win a toy," Brad said. "A stuffed bear?" Luna nodded. "He's really big. He has a red bow tie and one white ear. I saw him this morning. But I'm not very good at ring toss." "Why do you want the bear?" Luna hesitated, a little embarrassed. "He looks like my old one. The one I lost. We were moving, and I left him on the bus. I named him Ralphie. And this one, he looks like him." Brad nodded. He remembered his first stuffed friend, a bunny named Wood, worn to the threads. He hadn't thought about it in 20 years. But this park brought back all kinds of memories. "I wasn't a very brave kid," he said suddenly. "I was afraid of heights, the dark, and giant dolls. I once ran away from a robot that looked like Darth Vader. My mom still laughs about it." Luna giggled. He noticed her shoulders relax just a little. "I'm scared of a ride," she said quietly. "It's called Space Rocket. It's really tall. I tried to ride it 2 years ago. They strapped me in, and I got scared. I cried. Everyone was looking. My mom said it was okay. But I'm still scared." "You know what I've learned," he said. "Fear is like a storm. It makes noise, it's scary, but then it passes. The trick is not to hide from it, just wait it out. Or even walk through it. She looked at him seriously. Have you ever ridden space rocket? He paused. No. But maybe it's time? Well then, said Brad, tossing his paper cup into the bin. Shall we go take a look at that terrifying space rocket? Luna pressed her lips together, clutched her lemonade to her chest, and gave a slight nod. They walked along the park's central alley, surrounded by laughter, chatter, and the jingling of arcade machines. Every now and then, someone would glance at Brad, as if recognizing something about him, but he remained just the man in a hoodie, simple, unremarkable. Luna walked beside him, occasionally casting curious glances his way, wondering why a grown-up, a stranger, would want to join her on a ride. As they approached the space rocket, the girl instinctively slowed down. It was a massive structure, rising about 30 meters into the sky. People were already seated inside the capsule-shaped cabin. Below stood the operator, a bored teenager with a name badge on his chest. Loud music blared, and when the rocket began to rise, the speakers vibrated as if simulating a real launch. You don't have to, said Brad, looking at Luna. If you want, we can just stand here and watch. We can even scream along with them. Luna stood staring at the top of the rocket. Then she suddenly said, I want to try it. With you. Brad was momentarily taken aback. He hadn't expected her to decide so quickly. Then let's go, Captain, he said, and they headed toward the entrance. The operator glanced at them lazily, his gaze barely brushing Brad's face. Brad leaned toward him. I don't have a ticket, can I just pay here? Sure, sir, the guy replied without looking up from his phone. Just so you know, if the girl's under 120 centimeters, we won't let her on. I'm taller. Luna piped up immediately and even stood on tiptoes. Brad chuckled, paid, and helped Luna settle into her seat. He fastened her straps, then sat down next to her. Before takeoff, he looked at the girl. She was gripping the safety bars tightly, pale, but holding it together. If you get scared, just look at me, he said. Pretend we're in a movie. We're heroes saving the planet. And the rocket is our path to victory. What if I cry? Then I'll cry first, so you won't be alone. She nodded. The next moment, the rocket jolted and began to rise. The rumble grew louder. Wind rushed past their faces. The cabin shook. Brad looked down. From outside, the ride hadn't seemed that tall, but now, mid-ascent, everything felt completely different. Luna's lips were trembling. He reached out and took her fingers. She didn't look at him, but she didn't pull her hand away. And then, the top. A few seconds of absolute silence. And then, a sudden drop. They screamed at the same time, Luna with a high-pitched, piercing voice, Brad loud and hoarse, as if releasing all the stress of the past few months. Their screams mixed and turned into laughter, adrenaline pounding in their temples. After the second ascent, Luna suddenly opened her mouth and laughed. Not from fear anymore, but from something else. From freedom. When the capsule gently lowered onto the platform and the straps unbuckled, she jumped out of her seat. I did it! You did, Brad confirmed, getting up. And you didn't cry. You didn't either. Well, I've had more practice. They walked off the platform. Luna was glowing. The wind tousled her hair, and there was a mark from the seatbelt on her cheek. You know, she said. I kind of want to do it again. But later. Right now I need a marshmallow in chocolate. Deal, he replied. They headed back toward the food stalls, but just then Brad noticed a strange movement in the crowd. One of the passers-by, a man in a denim jacket, was holding his phone up for too long, clearly aiming it at them. Then he quickly turned and disappeared around the corner. Brad frowned. He knew that look all too well. And even more, that reaction, fake nonchalance, like a paparazzo who'd just gotten the shot and was trying to vanish before the subject realized what happened. "Luna, want that marshmallow?" he asked. "Very much." "Then let's go around the corner, fewer people there." He led her away. After passing a few kiosks, he stopped behind a cotton candy stand, took out his phone, and opened the internet. The headlines were already flashing. Brad Pitt spotted with unknown girl at Santa Clara Park. A new story? Celebrity secret stroll, who is the girl beside the actor? He closed the phone and sighed. "Is everything okay?" Luna asked, noticing how quiet he had suddenly become. "Just someone took our picture. Now people will start asking who you are." "Why?" "Because I'm Brad Pitt. And you're the wonderful girl I rode the rocket with." She blinked. "You're that Brad Pitt?" He nodded. The girl stared at him, mouth open. "But you don't look like in the movies. I'm older, tired, and not wearing makeup. But you're still cool." He laughed. "Thanks. But now I have to be a little more careful." Luna thought for a moment. What if I pretend to be your niece? Then no one will ask anything. We'll just say, we're out walking together." Brad looked at her for a couple of seconds, then slowly nodded. "Deal, niece. But in that case, you'll have to eat the marshmallow in chocolate on my behalf." "Easy." They headed back to the main alley. Brad felt a growing unease inside him. It wasn't the first time paparazzi had intruded on his private life. But here, beside this girl, he felt something more than concern, he felt responsibility. He didn't yet know that this day would turn into a real story. For now, everything felt like a random coincidence. A walk. A ride. Lemonade and marshmallows. But things were only about to get more complicated. They found a quiet corner near the fountain, where the pulsing streams of water drowned out the noise of the park. Brad sat down on a bench with 2 cups of hot marshmallow drinks, handing one to Luna. The girl began to eat greedily, smearing chocolate across her lips and smiling as if this was the most delicious moment of her life. "You know, you eat like someone in a SpongeBob movie," Brad joked. "Yeah? Well, I eat and live like I'm in a movie," she replied, not taking her eyes off the marshmallow. "Only in my movie, Mom left a long time ago, and Dad works all the time so we can live in a small room with a stain on the ceiling." Brad raised his eyebrows. "You always talk about it so calmly?" "Just got used to it," Luna shrugged. "And I like movies. When you watch them, everything seems different, like anything is possible. Even if you're just a girl with a worn-out backpack and no bike." "You don't have a bike?" "I did. It got stolen. Last year." Dad said, "The world's nasty sometimes. But the important thing is not to be like it." Brad didn't respond right away. He looked at her, at the way she calmly said things that adults usually swallow with pain. There was no complaint in her voice, just fact. "Do you come here to the park often?" "Nope. We just came today because Dad got a day off. He's over there somewhere, on a bench. Reading the newspaper. His face looks like the world is just one big accounting mistake." Brad chuckled. "Can I meet him?" Luna shrugged. "Maybe. But he probably won't recognize you. He doesn't watch TV at all. Says my eyes hurt from the lies." Brad smiled again. He liked this girl. There was something very alive in her, not showy, not naive. She talked like an adult, but without cynicism. "How did you even recognize me?" "Dad once watched a movie where you played a guy who makes a rifle and doesn't know how to love." "The Mexican?" "Maybe. I only saw the beginning. Then he sent me to bed. But I remembered your face." At that moment, a phone rang. Brad pulled it out of his pocket. Several messages from his agent. "You're already on Twitter. Call me ASAP. Photos everywhere. Where are you?" He slowly put the phone back. "Is everything okay?" Luna asked. "Yeah. Just looks like we've been noticed. We? Well, me for sure. You are still a mystery. Maybe I'm a spy. Or a princess who ran away from her palace. Or an actress, Brad added. You've got talent. You can keep your face steady even when there's a storm inside. Luna suddenly went quiet. And her expression changed, no longer childlike. She looked off into the distance, toward the tree swaying gently in the wind. Then she said, You know, sometimes I think we're all on stage. Just with different roles, and not everyone gets a fair one. Brad was about to respond when Luna suddenly tensed. There he is. Dad. Brad turned. A tall man with dark circles under his eyes was walking toward them. His jacket was worn, and he held a folded newspaper in his hands. His face looked tired, but there was determination in it. He noticed Brad, squinted, and stopped sharply. Luna, he said. What are you doing with this man? Dad, this is Brad. He just helped me, the girl said quickly. Brad who? Brad Pitt, Brad said himself, rising. We just rode the rocket and had marshmallows. I didn't mean to intrude. It all just happened. The man studied him for a long moment, as if measuring him with his eyes. Then he suddenly pulled that very newspaper from his pocket. He unfolded the front page and pointed to a photo. There he was, Brad Pitt, and Luna, at the exact moment she was pulling him toward the rocket. What the hell is this? The man rasped. Who took this? Brad shrugged. Paparazzi. Some guy with a phone. Must have posted the photo quickly. I didn't even realize. You understand they'll start digging into my daughter's past now? Into my family's past? Why is that so important? Brad asked cautiously. The man hesitated. Luna was silent, gripping the paper cup tightly. Because, the father finally said, we were photographed once before. 3 years ago. That ended with us losing our home and me getting fired. All because of one photo in one paper. Brad froze. What happened? The man pulled a second sheet from his inner pocket. On it was a yellowed photo, him, Luna, and a woman, probably her mother, standing in front of a courthouse. The headline read, Family accused of hiding identities and forged documents. It's an old story. They accused us unfairly. There were someone else's papers, fake contracts, and they pinned it all on me. We got out of it. But since then, I've tried to stay in the shadows. Brad slowly sat back down. Luna spoke quietly. Dad's not guilty. Mom forged the signatures back then. She left after. With someone else. We stayed alone. The man lowered his head. I don't want it to start all over again. You seem like a good guy, I can tell. But the world loves turning kindness into a show. Brad thought. He understood Luna's father. And still, he knew he couldn't just let this go. The photo was already online. The story had begun to unfold. We can do this, he said. I'll say it was a scene from a future project. Just a rehearsal. The girl's an actress. No names. No personal story. It'll die down in a week. The man looked at him. Then slowly nodded. If you really do that, I'll owe you. No need. But just know, sometimes kind stories are needed too. Sometimes, they just need a mask. Luna, who had been silent this whole time, suddenly said softly. Thank you, Brad. He looked at her. In that moment, he realized there are no coincidences. Sometimes you're just walking through a park, thinking about your own problems. And what you meet is fate. The night passed. Brad woke up in his house in Los Angeles, where panoramic windows overlooked the misty canyon, and his mind was still spinning. This was a scene from a future project, that's what he had written in his Instagram post. The photo with the moon and the rocket, attached to the words part of an experiment for a new movie about the fragility of childhood, had garnered almost 2 million likes and a flood of comments in just 24 hours. And yet, there was no peace inside. He opened his laptop and saw an email from his PR manager Georgina. "Brad, this has gotten out of hand. The media want to know the girl's name. They say they recognized her from an old case. The tabloids are digging. Call me." He dialed Georgina. She answered after the first ring. "Do you understand what you've done?" Her voice was icy. "This photo is a bombshell. On Twitter, they've already matched the moon's face with a photo from a 2022 case. They're finding everything: the mother, the court, the school, even the address where they lived. I said it was a scene. People believed it. No. They pretended to believe. And now they're digging. Do you have a plan?" "Yes. I need to go to the moon. To her father. Warn them. It's already too late. Look." She sent him a link. Brad clicked on it, and the headline appeared before him. "Mysterious girl from photo with Brad Pitt, subject of an old court case. Report from the scene." Under the photo of the rocket was the moon's face, and next to it, a cheap motel building in the suburbs, where she and her father had been hiding for the last 2 years. A reporter stood in front of the building while the police tried to push the journalists away. "Damn!" Brad exhaled. He jumped up, pulled on his jacket, and got in the car. The amusement park was an hour's drive away, but the motel, even farther, in the suburb of Santa Fe Springs. He turned on the GPS and drove, ignoring calls. While driving, he replayed his conversation with Moon's father. The words, "I don't want this to start again," now sounded like a prophecy. He arrived at the motel in the evening. 2 film crews were already there, with a crowd of people holding microphones. Inside the courtyard, several police officers were trying to push back the onlookers. Brad parked around the corner, pulled on his hood, and quickly made his way to the back entrance. He knew this was risky, but he felt he had to. Using the fire escape, he reached the 2nd floor, sneaked into the hallway, and, hiding from the cameras, knocked on the right door. It opened slightly. Moon's father peeked out. "You?" He looked at him skeptically. "How did you get in?" "I need to talk. Urgently." "Come in." It was dim inside. Moon sat on the bed, holding a backpack. She wasn't crying, but her gaze was glassy, like a child who had been forced to grow up too soon. "I'm sorry," Brad began. "I thought I could protect you. But I only sped things up." Moon's father silently sat at the edge of the bed. "Child services already called. They said they'll check the conditions. We've got 48 hours to leave the motel. The owner is afraid of a scandal." "Where will you live?" "I don't know. Maybe a shelter. If they don't deem me an unfit guardian again." That's when Moon spoke for the first time. Can we stay with you? At least for a couple of days?" Brad was taken aback. "With me? Well, I don't know how that works. But, maybe. I'll try." He was already pulling out his phone to call his lawyer when there was a loud knock at the door. Someone politely but firmly said, "Police? Please open up. We have a few questions." Brad turned pale. Moon's father sighed and moved toward the door. But Moon suddenly jumped up and grabbed Brad's hand. "This isn't the police." "Why do you think that?" "I saw a man downstairs. He was standing with a camera, but he wasn't holding it like a journalist. Under his jacket, there was something, like an antenna or wires. He's not a journalist." And the second one, wearing a cap, like a special agent. Moon's father froze. "We need to leave," Brad said. "Right now." "And where to?" "I have a second exit in my car. There's a back entrance. If we get through the warehouse, we can bypass it." They climbed out of the bathroom window, crawled along a narrow ledge, and descended the fire escape. The cameras ahead didn't spot them. By the time they reached the car, Moon turned around and said, "There was something else strange." "What?" "One of them had a tattoo of an arrow on his neck, the initial R. Mom used to say those were the people who helped her, in court. But then she got scared of them and disappeared." Brad stopped. "This is more than just journalists." "Yes. These are the ones who were watching her. And it looks like they're looking for us again." They reached Brad's house late at night. He showed them to the guest room. The house was secure with guards, and for now, it seemed safe. The next morning, he called Georgina and explained the situation. She brought in the lawyers. They began the process of legalizing temporary guardianship. But that same day, as Moon was watching cartoons in the living room, another news headline appeared on the screen. "Brad Pitt harboring subjects of old case? Mysterious girl and her father found in his home." The photo was taken by a drone. "They found us anyway," Moon whispered. "But now you're not alone," Brad replied. "We'll figure this out together." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, in an office with no sign, two men were watching the same screen. One, with the arrow tattoo on his neck, said, "She's there. With him. Now we'll have to act differently." The other nodded. "Let her return what was her mother's. Or she'll disappear too." Brad woke up early. It was quiet around him, and only the faint light was filtering through the curtains, blurring the outlines of the furniture in the living room. He turned on his side and saw Luna sitting on the couch, holding her little hands. She was staring out the window where the morning dawn was beginning to break. Brad quietly got up, threw on a t-shirt, and sat down next to her. "Are you okay?" he asked, trying to calm his concern. Luna didn't respond right away. She ran her fingers through her hair, almost imperceptibly gripping a strand. "We can stay here, right? I don't want to run anymore, Brad." He knew the question she asked wasn't about whether they could stay, but how long it would last. He didn't know how long he could keep her safe here, but he knew one thing: his life was changing, and now he was responsible for this girl. "We'll stay here," Brad said. "And I'll do everything to make sure you feel safe." Luna looked him in the eyes. "Do you trust me? You don't know who I am. You don't know what's been in my life." He thought for a moment but then nodded. "I trust you. You're not alone. Your father too. We're all here, and you can trust us. I promise you that." She sighed and finally smiled. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, two people with arrow tattoos were still keeping watch over Brad's house. One of them, named Rick, looked at his laptop screen, which displayed the latest drone images. There was something ominous in his eyes. "Are you sure Brad is the one we'll work with?" asked the second person, Matt, who was more reserved, wore glasses, and didn't like being on camera. "We're not going to work with him," Rick replied. "We'll take her, and Brad will have no choice but to comply with our terms. He's too kind to refuse the deal." Meanwhile, Brad was taking action. He understood that hiding Luna in his house for long wasn't going to be possible. He contacted lawyers, but it wasn't that simple. Not only legal forces were involved, but also those behind Luna's past. He arranged a meeting with an old friend, Jim, a well-known cinematographer and security expert. Jim was one of the few who knew Luna's real history, including her mother and her involvement in an old lawsuit that had been kept hidden from the public. Brad turned to Jim for help. "You understand this isn't just an accident, Brad," Jim said, sitting across from him in a small cafe downtown. "They'll find her. And if you don't get answers to all the questions, you'll soon be at the center of a completely different story." Brad sighed. "Are you saying her mother was involved in something serious?" Jim paused, staring out the window. "Not something serious, Brad. You don't understand who her mother was and what she left behind. Everything related to her life wasn't just tied to criminals. It was a real conspiracy. And, if I'm not mistaken, those who are looking for Luna now were part of it. I don't know how much time we have left, but you need to decide if you want to go all the way. Brad felt his heart tighten. He never expected that simple kindness, helping a child, would lead to something of this scale. That day, when he and Luna were about to leave the house for another consultation, the doorbell rang. Brad tensed up, and Luna, noticing his reaction, asked, "Who is it?" He approached the door and looked through the peephole. He only saw silhouettes. He opened the door, and two people stood on the doorstep. One was tall, wearing a leather jacket, with a beard and a serious expression. The other was shorter, with an eye patch. "Brad Pitt?" asked the first one, his voice firm. Brad felt a wave of anxiety but kept his composure. "Yes. How can I help you?" "We're representatives of an organization," said the second one, handing him a business card. "We need to talk. It's about the girl. We want to discuss the terms." Brad felt the blood drain from his face. He took a step back, trying to close the door, but the tall man quickly stuck his foot in the gap. "We don't want to harm anyone. But we have our methods," the first man continued. Brad froze, not knowing what to do. "This isn't up for discussion," the man went on. "We're taking the girl, Brad. You know how this works." At that moment, Luna dashed out of the room and stood next to Brad. She stood right in front of the door, despite her small size, with a determination that didn't fit her age. "I'm not going," she said. "I'm not going back there." The bearded man was a bit taken aback. "This isn't your decision, little girl. You don't understand who you're dealing with." But Brad stepped in between them. "You're not taking her," he said firmly. "Leave. And don't come back." The men exchanged glances, but hearing something unwavering in his voice, they decided to retreat. One of them pulled out a cell phone from his pocket and whispered, "We're not done, Pitt. Remember that." When Brad returned to the room, Luna was sitting on the couch, holding a pillow. "What did they want?" she asked quietly. "It doesn't matter. We're not leaving. I'm going to fight for you." And at that moment, Brad realized that, despite all the threats, he had already become a part of this world, the world where Luna was now his family, and he would protect her at any cost. Brad couldn't stop. He ran through all the possibilities, all the potential moves, but the more he thought, the clearer it became, they couldn't stay in hiding. The people who were after Luna wouldn't back off. They had come for her, and no matter what he had done, his promises weren't enough to save them. Luna, sitting on the couch in the shadows, listened to every step Brad took. She couldn't understand what exactly was making him so worried. Was it fear for her life, his own, or both? "Brad," she said quietly, lifting her eyes, "you said you'd protect me. We can't just give up like this." He turned around, meeting her gaze. There was no fear in her eyes, no tears. Only firm determination. "I'll do everything to keep you safe, Luna. But the world we live in doesn't forgive people like you and me. These people, they won't stop. I need to figure out what happened." Luna stood up and walked over to him. She touched his hand, as if trying to pass him her strength. He felt her touch and understood she wasn't a little girl who needed protecting. She was a real person, with her own struggles, her own understanding of the world. "You're not alone, Brad. We're in this together," she said, her voice soft but confident. He paused, and his gaze drifted out the window. The outside world, filled with light and movement, was not as dangerous as those waiting outside his door. He knew a decision had to be made. They couldn't stay hidden forever. "We'll take action, Luna. It's time." The next day, Brad decided it was time to find those who were chasing Luna. He contacted Jim, who told him about possible ways to solve the problem. Everything Brad knew was connected to a company that could be involved with her mother's case, a company that wasn't just focused on research and development, but also on dirty dealings, hidden from the public eye. Together with Luna, Brad headed to the old part of town where the company's main office was located. He knew they would face danger, but now, seeing Luna's determination, he couldn't back down. They sneaked through warehouse areas and approached an old building. Inside, it was dark, and the cold wind from outside seeped through the gaps in the window frames. "We need to be careful," Brad whispered as they descended into the basement. This was where Luna's story began. It was here that her mother came to start her secret business. Everything she had left behind were dark traces, threatening both her and her daughter. Brad and Luna quickly found the necessary documents, old photographs, records of experiments, and most importantly, documents revealing who was behind the entire story. When they returned to the surface, Brad called the police. He handed over the evidence. On one hand, these documents destroyed the secret that had been hidden in the shadows. On the other hand, they gave them a chance. A chance that they could now bring everything to an end. When Brad and Luna returned home, they found out that this time they had won. Not through physical force, but through wisdom and determination. Those who had tried to use her mother were now paying the price. The criminal network had been destroyed. The power that had been behind the scenes was no longer looming over them. Luna looked at Brad, and he realized that this moment was important not only for her, but for him as well. He wasn't just an actor, he wasn't just a celebrity. He was a person who had made a choice. And that choice had been the right one. Time passed. Brad and Luna continued their lives. Now, with everything behind them, Luna could return to what she had wanted, to live, to learn, to find her place in the world. Brad was there, but no longer as a protector, but as a mentor. They both knew that many challenges lay ahead, but now they were ready to face them together. Brad knew one thing: the world they lived in wasn't kind, but there was a place for people like him and Luna. People who weren't afraid to make the right choice, despite all the threats. And so, standing on the threshold of a new beginning, Brad Pitt and Luna knew that they could walk through life without looking back. Because they had learned to be strong, no matter what.